This unused night sprite, Medusa needed more clothes, and just who is this little guy lurking in the menu of Final Fantasy 1? All this and way more in the unused content of FF1, and it starts right now. Do you know who Stephen Reese is? Well, if you do, I'd like to shake his hand. He's the host of a YouTube channel called The Art of Nintendo Power, and several years ago he bought a box that had a bunch of pre-release versions of NES games that all came together in a lot, and for the most part, they were all just the same version of various games that ultimately got released. But 6 of them were different, and one of these games just happened to be the prototype to FF1 for NES. And the spells, lines of dialogue, and even classes are very different from what we ended up with over here. I have a ROM of it, and if you would like me to play it and rip it apart on the channel, I am more than happy to do it. In fact, I need a reason to play it all the way through. And I can do it on a live stream or just make a video about it. Let me know. I would have cried if it were me that found that NES cart. But anyway, moving on. As far as unused content in FF1, there's not a massive amount of things, but there are some very interesting finds, some of which I covered in my last video. That's worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. Click that card. I might have uncovered the full development period of FF1, which isn't documented anywhere on the internet. Believe me, I searched high and low. But the very first bit of unreleased content, technically speaking, is the 15-block puzzle game that Nazar Gabelli added without direction from anyone else during the development of the game. For the sake of completion, I had to mention that. Before continuing, all of this stuff came from the cutting room floor. I feel like I have to say that, so props to them for finding all this stuff. It's incredible. This regal-looking fellow, the cutting room floor says that this particular sprite is sandwiched between Matoya and soldiers, and it uses the same palette as the warrior or fighter sprite. It's a full sprite set that walks and is animated, but it's just never used. The cutting room floor says that the logical explanation is that it's a prototype of the Prince of Elves, despite having normal ears, but I disagree. I really think that this could be a couple of different things. We're going to start off with Astos. Astos ended up being the king sprite with a switched palette, but does it correspond with the October 16th, 1987 issue of Famicom Tsushin? This black wizard sprite has a palette swap. It could be a placeholder for a red mage or white wizard. This sprite stands out from normal townspeople. Maybe it's an original party member sprite. This little guy and the shield and star. Since they're found with the menu graphics and the same palette is used, I understand the last two. It could be used with equipment, items, or magic. I'm not sure about the little guy though. There's a YouTube channel called She Says, and they do what they call boundary breaks of video games. And what that means is taking the camera off screen to see things that you weren't meant to. And during the development of either Chrono Trigger or Secret of Mana, I can't remember, there was a little creature that was used to ultimately say that the coding of a particular thing worked. So could this be something that tells us that the coding of something was correct and worked out? I don't think so. In fact, this is my official educated guess. Maybe this is something that tells us the description of equipment, items, or magic, very similar to the Help Moogle of FF9. That's my guess. I don't know if that's right at all. Now, I covered this a short time ago, but if you go to Castle Cornelia and get to a specific spot, you can speak to an invisible person. We don't know that it's a woman yet. If you input a walk through walls Game Genie code, you can see her. She's just programmed wrong. See, typically in the programming, whenever you step through a door into a room, the graphics change slightly and people outside the room disappear and the people inside appear. And the invisible woman's coding is just flipped. Whoops. Unused behavior. There are 2 spots that don't change, but it alters the game's progression. It depends on what items you have in your inventory. In the Citadel of Trials, or known here as the Castle of Ordeals, you need to get the crown to continue, like this person says. If you got through without the crown using Game Genie or some divine intervention, he still says the same thing, but the throne inside the room in the northwest has no ability to warp you anywhere. The second unused behavior is with a character named Sarda, and Sarda is the old man you get the rod from after you defeat Vampire in the Earth Cavern. If the Vampire isn't defeated, he says the exact same text string that displays after you get the rod. You just don't get the rod. That's it. There are a ton of version differences. And I'm just going to kind of rapid fire these, only stopping to explain something or maybe ask you to help me explain something. The start menu. The only change here is copyright info was added. The title screen, some things were moved around to allow for the copyright info, but it's not really needed. The text box size was changed, but the background wasn't. And somehow this affected the artifacts of the FF logo that now appears in the grass and trees right here. The final floor, the Chaos Shrine, in the Japanese version it's a giant hexagram, could be seen as religious symbolism. Now it's just a weird triangle with the pillars deleted. And also the random encounters on this floor are taken away completely in the American version. In the church, the steeple was changed to get rid of religious themes. It's not just on screen that the steeple was changed, it's in the coding itself, so it just couldn't be used. And the heart sign that we got here in the West on our clinics 6 was supposed to have the same palette as the other shops, but they never actually changed it. And inside the church, there's no pope. All the crosses and stars of David were switched to candles and other triangles. Enemy differences: Medusa needs a top. The eye enemy was completely changed to not be sued by D&D. If you look at the beholder enemy from D&D, you can see why. And here are the super subtle changes, and this is where you can help me out. The fighter/warrior's facial direction was changed, just slightly. The white mage hood gets a little taller. The ninja's legs don't move when animated. The master, which is called a super monk in Japan, grew a mullet. I kind of know this one. There's a lot of movies and fashion at the time that kind of center around the mullet, so I kind of understand that one, but maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. Red Wizard's cape was finished being drawn. These swords. Can you please tell me what the changes are with these swords? I've looked, and I've looked a lot, but I can't tell what they are. These little icons were added to the US version. Letter limitations could only explain so much, and the icons were created and used in future games also. And text colors were changed in the weapon and armor menus. This is probably due to coding laziness to change text size in the coding. So the development of Final Fantasy I is insanely interesting. There was a Japanese broadcast of a TV show that documented it, and from it I found so many things. And through using real-world cases of game development, I uncovered some things in my last video that aren't documented anywhere else on the internet. My name is Leonard Phillips, and you've just explored the Returner's Hideout. Love you.